Marcus Dellworth was holding a tray of champagne when his entire life turned a corner he never saw coming. The ballroom at the Meridian Hall glittered the way money glitters when it has nothing left to prove. Chandeliers threw light across marble floors. Women in gowns that cost more than his rent laughed in tight little circles. Men in tailored jackets talked about numbers that would never matter to a man like Marcus. Numbers with too many zeros to mean anything real. Nobody looked at him. That was the job. Pour the champagne. Smile if someone glances your way. Disappear if they don't. He had gotten good at disappearing. Then a woman's voice cut across the room, sharp and amused, the kind of voice that was used to being heard. "You look like you work out, sweetheart. You look like you think you're tough." Laughter rippled through the circle near her. Marcus kept his eyes down, kept pouring. He had heard worse. He had heard worse from people with a fraction of this woman's money. "Tell you what," she said. "Let's make tonight interesting." She gestured behind her, to a wall of a man standing at her shoulder. 6'4", built like something assembled rather than born. "Travis is going to hit you one time, as hard as he wants. You stay on your feet, I write you a check for $3 million right now. You go down, you walk out with your tip money and a story." The room erupted. Phones came out. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from watching another person get smaller. Marcus set the tray down on the nearest table. He unbuttoned his server's jacket, folded it, and laid it over the back of a chair. And the big man standing behind the woman, the one called Travis, looked at him for the first time. Really looked. His face changed. The contempt melted off it like wax near a flame, and underneath was something that looked, unmistakably, like fear. "Ma'am," Travis said, his voice catching. "Please, call this off. You don't know who this is." The room went still. "I'm going to tell you everything. Who I was before that night. What I gave up to become invisible. Why I was the one holding that tray. And why a 6'4" combat veteran begged his own boss to stop a fight before it started. But first, you should know the one thing this whole story is really about. It was never about the money, and it was never about the punch. Stick around, because before I tell you why Travis went pale, I need you to understand exactly who he was looking at. If stories like this, the quiet kind, the kind about real strength, mean something to you, hit subscribe right now so you don't lose this channel. I promise you, what happens next is worth staying for. My name is Marcus Dellworth. I'm 43 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and that night, I was nobody, a man in a rented uniform pouring drinks for people who had more money in their watches than I'd see in 10 years of work. I needed that invisibility. I needed the $340 the catering agency was paying me, because my daughter Renee had a dental appointment that Thursday, and the bill the receptionist quoted me was sitting in my chest like a stone I couldn't put down. During the week, I work 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Overnight security at a warehouse off Interstate 270. Weekend shifts hauling furniture for a moving company in Worthington. Construction cleanup whenever a site will have me. I'm not telling you this so you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because you need to understand exactly who was standing in that ballroom, holding a tray, getting laughed at by people who had never worked a day they didn't choose to. A man with 3 jobs. A man doing arithmetic in his head about a dental bill. A man with a 9-year-old daughter at home named Renee, whose name I want you to remember, because everything that happens in this story happens for her. That's who Vanessa Aldrich thought she was looking at. She had no idea. 12 years before that night, I was not a man carrying drinks through a ballroom. I was a fighter. Professional mixed martial arts, trained out of a gym in Cincinnati called Irongate, under a coach named Dwayne Pruitt, a man who saw something in a 19-year-old kid and spent the next decade pulling it out of him, fight by fight, year by year. I went 28-0. 28 professional fights. Not one man ever finished me. They called me the Wall. Not because I hit the hardest. Not because I was flashy or fast or had a highlight reel full of knockouts. They called me that because of one specific thing, and once you understand it, you'll understand everything else about who I am. You could not put me on the canvas. I need you to understand what that actually means, because it has nothing to do with a thick skull or a strong jaw. It lives somewhere underneath the physical. It's a refusal. A deep, stubborn, almost cellular refusal to give another man the satisfaction of watching you fall. You can train your conditioning. You can train your technique. But that refusal, the thing that keeps your legs under you when your brain is ringing like a fire alarm and every nerve you have is screaming at you to go down, that's either built into a person or it isn't. It was built into me. I was one fight away from a UFC title shot. One fight away from the kind of money that buys a house outright, sets your children up for life, and lets you breathe for the first time since you were a kid yourself. And then I walked away from every bit of it. People back in Columbus still bring it up. My old training partners shake their heads when my name comes up. My manager at the time, a man named Phil Ostrander, called me from his car the day I quit and wept on the phone. Actually wept. He told me I was throwing away a fortune. He told me I was out of my mind. He wasn't wrong about the fortune, but nobody, not Phil, not my coaches, not a single person who claimed to love me ever understood why I walked away. Not really. I've never told the full story. Not once. Not all the way through. I'm about to tell it to you now. My last fight before the title shot was in Las Vegas, inside the T-Mobile Arena, against a kid from Albuquerque, 24 years old. Hungry in that specific way that reminds you of yourself when you were that age, before life had carved anything off of you yet. Good. Genuinely good. In the 5th round, I caught him with a combination I had thrown 10,000 times in training. A left hook to the body. A straight right hand to the temple. He went down. And he did not get upright. There was a stretcher. There was an ambulance. There was a hospital called Sunrise Medical Center, and a waiting room where I sat for 2 days straight while a 24-year-old kid lay in a medically induced coma down the hall. His mother flew in alone from New Mexico. A small woman, in a yellow cardigan. She walked right past me in that hallway, twice, without knowing who I was. Without knowing I was the reason her son was behind that door. I knew exactly who I was. I looked down at my own hands, those 2 days, the way you'd look at something dangerous you'd accidentally let loose in a crowded room. For my whole career, I had told myself I was an athlete. A competitor. A professional doing a dangerous job with skill and control. Sitting in that waiting room, the truth finally caught up with me, and it walked in slow and sat down right next to me and didn't leave. I was a man who got paid to hurt other human beings, and I had gotten so efficient at it that I had nearly killed somebody's son. He woke up on the 2nd day. He recovered, mostly. He never fought again, and I made him a promise. I made God a promise. I made that empty waiting room a promise, every promise a man makes when he is finally, truly afraid of what he has become. I kept every one of them. I want to tell you exactly why I kept those promises. Because the reason isn't what you'd expect. It isn't guilt. Guilt fades. What happened to me next is the only reason those promises never broke. Not once, not even years later in a ballroom full of people daring me to break them. While I was sitting in that Vegas waiting room, terrified I had ended a 24-year-old's life, my phone rang. It was Carla, my wife, 8.5 months pregnant, back home in Columbus. She didn't sound scared. She didn't sound rushed. She just said 4 words, calm as anything. Marcus, it's time. I drove straight to the airport in the same clothes I'd been wearing in that hospital. I flew home that night. I got to Ohio Health Riverside Hospital in Columbus at 4 in the morning, and 4 hours after that, a nurse placed my daughter into my hands. These same hands, I sat in that delivery room, holding a newborn in the same hands that had put a stranger's son into a coma 3 days earlier. And something in me broke open and reformed at the same time. I made a promise so deep it didn't need actual words. But if it had needed words, it would have been this. These hands are done. Done with the ring. Done with hurting people for a paycheck. Done with all of it. From that morning forward, these hands were going to hold my daughter, and feed her, and work for her, and that was the only fight they were ever going to be part of again. I called Phil Ostrander the next day and told him I was finished. I called the promotion and turned down the title shot. I walked away from a career that was 1 win away from its absolute peak, and I never once looked back. Not for a single day in 12 years. 2 years ago, Carla got sick. Pancreatic cancer. The fast kind. The kind that doesn't negotiate. 4 months from the day we got the diagnosis to the day we buried her, Renee was 7 years old. I was working then as a youth athletic coordinator for Columbus Parks and Recreation. A job I loved that paid almost nothing, and that I suddenly had to do while raising a grieving 7-year-old completely alone. So that's the man who was standing in that ballroom the night Vanessa Aldrich looked across the room and decided I might be entertaining. A widower. A single father working 3 jobs just to stay afloat. A former undefeated fighter that not one person in that building had any earthly reason to recognize. Carrying a tray of champagne. Thinking about a $680 dental bill he didn't know how he was going to pay. That's who she thought she was talking to. She had absolutely no idea what she was standing in front of. And in about 30 seconds, neither did anyone else in that room until the man standing guard beside her looked me in the eye and remembered exactly who I was. If a story like this, the kind that reminds you what real strength actually looks like, is the kind of thing that sticks with you, I'd be grateful if you hit that subscribe button before we go any further. There is a lot more to this story, and I promise you, it gets harder before it gets better. The event was a private fundraiser, rented out for the evening at the Meridian Hall by a woman named Vanessa Aldrich. You might know that name. If you follow business news at all, you definitely know it. Vanessa Aldrich is the founder and CEO of Aldrich Digital, a tech infrastructure company out of San Francisco, worth somewhere north of $4 billion. She had been on the cover of Forbes twice. She was 46 years old, sharp as a blade, and that night, she was bored in the specific, dangerous way that only people who have had absolutely everything for far too long get bored. Boredom in an ordinary person is just boredom. In a person with that much money and that much power, it curdles into something else entirely. It becomes cruelty, dressed up and paraded around as entertainment. She had been drinking. She was holding court at the center of a circle that looked exactly like her hedge fund managers, tech founders, a celebrity investor or two. And at some point, her eyes drifted across the room and landed on me. I felt it before I even looked up. It started small. A comment about the way I was pouring, pitched just loud enough for me to hear. A joke to her circle about the help needing a lesson in manners. A ripple of laughter. I kept my face still and kept moving. I have spent my whole life being underestimated by people like her. You learn to let it settle on you like dust, and you keep walking. But my not reacting seemed to bother her. People like Vanessa, performing cruelty for an audience, need a reaction. The reaction is the entire point of the performance. Without one, they escalate. She escalated. I want you to understand something. Before I go further, I felt every single thing she said that night. Every comment. Every laugh from her circle. I am not a stone. I am a man who chose, again and again, in real time, not to react. That choice cost me something every single time I made it. It was the hardest work I did all year, and nobody in that room had any idea I was doing it. She called me over, in front of everyone, and said the words I will never forget, because some words carve themselves into you permanently. You look like you work out, sweetheart. You look like you think you're tough. Tell you what, let's make tonight interesting. And that's when she gestured to the man behind her, the one called Travis. His full name, I'd learn within the hour, was Travis Colburn, her head of personal security. 6'4", 260 pounds, a former Army Ranger who'd done private security work in 3 different countries. He looked like something that had been built in a lab for exactly one purpose. Vanessa smiled at her audience and said it loud enough for the whole circle to hear. Travis is going to hit you one time, as hard as he wants. You stay on your feet. I write you a check for $3 million right now. You go down, you walk out with your tip money and a story. What do you say, honey? Gasps. Laughter. The particular electric thrill that runs through wealthy people watching someone get put back in their place. Somebody's phone came out, already filming. I stood there, and something old, something I had spent 12 years putting to sleep, opened one eye. And then, before anything else, I did the math. $3 million. Do you have any idea what $3 million is to a man standing where I was standing? It isn't an amount of money. It's a complete rewrite of my daughter's entire future. It's the difference between Renee choosing any college she wants and Renee choosing whatever college we could scrape together for. It's a real house instead of the 2-bedroom apartment on Morse Road we'd been renting since Carla died. It's the dental bill, sure, but it's also every dental bill after it, every school trip, every "we'll see" that both of us already knew meant no. It was a $3 million insult, thrown by a woman who would never once feel the absence of that check from her bank account. And here is what Vanessa Aldrich had no possible way of knowing. I was the man who had never been knocked down. Not once. Not by 28 professional fighters, every one of them at the peak of their careers, every one of them trying their hardest to put me on the floor. Travis Colburn was big. Travis Colburn could undoubtedly hit. But Travis Colburn was not a trained fighter, and I could see it instantly in the way he stood, in how his weight settled, in the set of his shoulders. I had read 1,000 men with that exact same stance, and I had never once been wrong. He could hit me with absolutely everything he had, and I would not go down. I knew that with the same certainty I know my own daughter's face. She thought she was offering me a humiliation. She was actually offering me my daughter's entire future for something I could do in my sleep. I set my tray down before she even finished her sentence. "I'll take that," I said. The circle went wild. I unbuttoned my server's jacket. I folded it carefully and laid it over the back of a nearby chair. I rolled up my sleeves, and I squared up to take the punch. That is the exact moment everything in that room started to change. Because Travis Colburn had been looking at me, up to that second, the way a big man looks at an easy problem. Professional contempt. Just a job. Then, I took off the jacket. Then, I squared up. And his face did something I will never, as long as I live, forget. The contempt fell off Travis Colburn's face like a mask slipping, and underneath it was recognition. And right behind the recognition, fast, was something that looked almost like fear on a man who had served in actual combat zones and was not afraid of much of anything. There is a language shared between people who have lived inside the fighting world. It lives in the hands, in the stance, in the particular stillness of a body that has spent 20 years learning how to absorb and deliver punishment. You cannot fake that language, and you cannot hide it. Not even 12 years removed from the cage. Not even wearing a rented server's uniform. The body remembers what it was built to do. Travis Colburn spoke that language fluently. He had grown up in that world, and when I squared up, my body did exactly what it had done 10,000 times before it settled. Feet shoulder-width apart. Weight forward, chin down, hands loose at my sides. Travis read all of that in less than a second. He stepped back, a 260-pound former Army Ranger, a man who had stood between his clients and real, documented danger in 3 different countries. He stepped back from me. He turned to Vanessa Aldrich, and the room watched, confused, the laughter dying out fast, something uncertain moving through the crowd like a current as Travis's face went pale and his hands came up in front of him. "Ma'am, please call this off." Vanessa laughed, sharp and irritated. "Travis, don't be dramatic. Just, ma'am." His voice actually cracked on the word. "You don't know who this is. I cannot put my hands on this man. I will not. Do you understand me?" The room went completely, totally silent. Vanessa stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "He's a waiter, Travis." Travis looked at me. And in 12 years of disappearing into an ordinary life, 12 years of being just a man with a tray, or a man with a broom, or a man with a tool belt, nobody ever once recognizing what they were looking at in 12 years. Nobody had ever looked at me the way Travis Colburn looked at me in that moment. Like he was looking at something that belonged behind glass in a museum. He said my name, my old fighting name, the one nobody in that entire ballroom had any reason on earth to know. And then he turned to his own boss, this hired professional muscle, this man paid to project danger, and he said the thing that silenced a room full of some of the most powerful people in the building. "Ma'am, this man was undefeated. 28 fights. They called him the Wall, because nobody, not one person in his entire career, ever managed to put him on the canvas." He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You just offered him $3 million to take a punch and stay on his feet. He could take a punch from anyone alive on this earth and stay standing, but that isn't even the point." His voice dropped low, got quiet, got almost gentle, in a way that didn't match a man his size at all. "The point is, ma'am, if this man ever decided to answer back, there is not enough security in this entire building. You're not in any danger right now, because I can see exactly what kind of man he is just by watching him stand there and absorb your insults all night without a flinch. But do you understand what you've been doing? Do you understand who you've been treating like a toy?" The room held its breath. Every eye in that ballroom swung to Vanessa Aldrich, and then every eye swung to me. I felt it the full weight of that moment. The revenge that was just sitting there, free for the taking, already half applauded by a room that had turned on her in 5 seconds flat. I could feel exactly how good it would feel, for about 10 seconds, to let that whole crowd watch me take it. To let Vanessa Aldrich feel, just once in her life, what it is to be made small in a room full of people watching. I thought about Carla. I thought about a delivery room in Columbus, Ohio, 12 years earlier, and a promise that didn't need words. These hands are done. I walked over to Travis Colburn. I put my hand out. He shook it, this enormous man, this combat veteran, this hardened professional, and he had tears standing in his eyes. Because I said, quiet, just for him to hear. That took more guts than throwing the punch would have. You're a good man, Travis. Then I picked my server's jacket up off the chair. I put it back on. I turned to Vanessa Aldrich, and I said it with no edge in it at all, no performance, nothing but the plain truth. I think I should get back to work, ma'am. Guests need their glasses filled. That was the moment she broke. Not from fear, the opposite of fear. She had spent the entire evening being cruel to a man who held more actual power in his restraint than she held in her whole fortune, and when he answered her with nothing but gentleness, she had nothing left to push against. Just a mirror, held up close, showing her exactly who she had been all night long. She walked over to me. Her hands were shaking. I owe you an apology, she said. A real one. I have been awful tonight, and you have shown me more grace than I deserve. And then she said she was writing the check, not because of the bet. She told me, plainly, that she wanted to do one decent thing before the night was over. I took it, every penny of $3 million, without one moment of guilt. A proud man might have refused it on principle, but I wasn't standing there as a proud man. I was standing there as a father, and a father took it, because it was never about me. It was about Renee. It was always, only, about Renee. I told her that. I told her I had a 9-year-old daughter waiting for me at home on Morse Road, whose mother had passed 2 years earlier, and that $3 million was the entire distance between the life I could give her and the life she actually deserved. Vanessa Aldrich put her hand over her mouth and turned away. You never know what a little mercy is going to do to somebody. Sometimes it does more than a fist ever could. We're almost at the end of this one, and where this story lands is going to stay with you. Before we get there, if you've made it this far, do me one favor. Hit that like button and drop a single word in the comments that describes what you'd have done in my shoes. I read every one. Now let's finish this. Renee is set. That's the first thing, and it's the only thing that ever really mattered. College, whatever school she dreams of, fully paid. A real house with a real yard, instead of 2 bedrooms on Morse Road. The kind of sleep that comes from never doing bill arithmetic at midnight again. I still work, not because I have to anymore. Because I don't know how to be a man who doesn't work, and because work, even now, still feels like dignity to me. Travis Colburn and I are friends now. He left Vanessa's security detail within the month. These days, he coaches youth wrestling out of a gym in Dublin, Ohio, and from what I hear, he's extraordinary at it. He teaches those kids one lesson above every other lesson there is. The strongest thing a fighter ever learns is when not to fight. He tells them he learned it from a man in a catering vest. Vanessa Aldrich sent me a letter 8 months later. She wrote that the night cracked something open in her that had been sealed shut for a long, long time. She said she'd been trying ever since to be a different kind of person with her money and her time. I believe she meant it. People are hard to change. But they're not impossible to change. The night I got home, I paid the babysitter, and I walked down the hall to Renee's room. She was asleep, 9 years old, with her mother's nose, and her mother's exact way of sleeping with one hand curled up under her chin. I stood in that doorway for a long time. I had a $3 million check folded into the breast pocket of a rented server's jacket, and the single most important thing in my entire life was the sound of my daughter breathing in the dark. I went in. I tucked her blanket up under her chin. She stirred, half asleep, and murmured, "Daddy?" "I'm here, baby," I told her. "Go back to sleep. Everything's good." And for the first time in 2 years, I meant it completely. The strongest thing I have ever done in my life is not winning 28 professional fights. Any tough kid with fast hands and a good chin can win fights. The strongest thing I have ever done was make a promise in a delivery room in Columbus, Ohio, and keep it for 12 straight years, even on the one single night when a room full of powerful people would have stood up and cheered me for breaking it. That is the real championship, not knocking another person down. It's having every reason, every right, and every single ability in the world to knock them down and choosing, for love, to keep your hands open instead. So let me ask you something before you go. When have you seen that kind of strength in your own life? When did someone have every right to destroy something and chose not to? Or when did you manage to do that yourself, on a day nobody else even noticed? Tell me in the comments. Those are the stories I actually want to hear. Those are the real champions, the ones nobody writes articles about. If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me telling it, do one more thing before you go. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. There are a lot more stories like this one waiting to be told, and I don't want you to miss a single one of them. And if somebody in your life needs a reminder of what real strength actually looks like, send them this. You might be surprised who it reaches. I'll see you in the next story.